The next one is water. I know. Well, how much? I know you get a lot of liquid from the high fruit diet that you're eating. So how much water do you drink? Just plain water on a regular basis.
I drink enough water so that, well, let me answer the question that I think you're asking.
Okay.
Rather than make a recommendation for how much water we should eat in term or drink in terms of quantity, I monitor something completely different in order to track hydration. So what I'm looking at instead is how often do I urinate, and the volume and the volume, the frequency, and the color of the urination. So if I have an urge to urinate, but all that comes out is a drop, I'm dehydrated. If I have an urge to urinate, and when I urinate, it's very yellow, I'm dehydrated. In both of those instances, I add water. If the volume is low, if the color is yellow, I'm adding water. If I'm urinating 8 to 10 times per day, which is a number that I've made up myself, okay? I'm not stating any medical thing. In the world of medicine, 5 to 6 times per day is considered normal. I think that's an indication of dehydration when I'm down that low. I see sports performance tail off in athletes when they urinate that infrequently. I understand that the average urination is somewhere around 4 to 500 mil, you know, and that not everybody urinates the exact same quantity every time they go. But I'm talking about an average. And on average, if you're not urinating 8 times a day, you're probably dehydrated and you need to add a little bit of water. If you're urinating more than 12 times per day, reduce water intake to get. I've just had 2 clients this week who came to me with huge medical problems, and both of them turned out that they were drinking 6 liters of water a day every day. And all we did was cut the water until they started urinating 10 times per day, which for both of them meant no water at all. But we cut the water, and both of them felt magnificently better in less than a week.
So they were drinking too
So,
much.
way too much. They're diluting their minerals, which means that you can't get muscular contractions, including the heart. They're diluting. Um, they're diluting everything within their blood to the point where they're literally drowning themselves. It
What do you,
was it was not pretty. There's a lot of ways it can go wrong by drinking too much.
and when we talk about water, what's your favorite or safest quality of water that you suggest that
Well,
you personally drink or that you suggest people drink?
um, as we've just noted, the best water is coming out of fruits and vegetables. But after that, if we're going to add water, I distill my own water. I have for 40 years. I'm still happiest with distilled water, but any quality RO system makes great water that's perfectly acceptable to me. Um, there is a type of water called it's a word we almost never say, condensated water. So for instance, if you have a cold glass of fluid, or just a cold glass, put a glass in the freezer, take it out, it'll get water on the outside. Water will condense onto the cold. And condensated water literally pulled out of the environment, out of the air, is some of the best water I've ever drank. There are machines that make condensated water, so they're creating water out of nothing. It's pretty cool. Um, but to be quite honest, it's now June. I haven't drank any water this year. I'm not trying. I'm not going for the record. If I'm thirsty, I'll drink a glass of water. But I haven't had to drink any water this year. That's not true. I drank one glass of water when I was in Costa Rica. Um, but but I almost never ever ever need to drink water or add water to anything. Uh, And so when you're
That's
not
because you're
drinking,
getting it from the water from the fruits.
it's partly because I'm getting it from my fruits and vegetables. I'd say it's more so because I'm not eating salt. I'm not eating anything that makes me thirsty. So I'm not focusing on dehydrated foods. I'm not eating salty things and the things that make me thirsty. I'm not dehydrating myself, um, sunbathing between 10 and 12, or between
Sure.
12 and 2 in the hottest part of the day in the hottest places in the world. uh, so I'm not forcing myself to become dehydrated. But even more important perhaps is how unimportant the question becomes. If you're not drinking much water, it doesn't matter what kind of water you drink.
Sure.
We're
Sure.
back to homegrown vegetables versus
Sure.
store-bought vegetables, because the nuance, let's say there was this bottled water and that bottled water, and you know that this bottled water is better than that, for some reason, but you're only going to drink one bottle per year. How much does it matter?
For those that are creating a need to need more water and they drink more water, do you think like if they're doing RO or distilled water, they should add nutrients, or you don't see?
No, 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 I don't think you leach nutrients. There's nothing there's nothing about the science of hydration that says we leach nutrients when we add water. If I put a bunch of minerals in a glass and add water, I haven't lost any minerals, and the body doesn't lose or give up minerals. We add water because we're dehydrated, which means that the nutrient or the mineral or the other chemical content within the body has become too concentrated. And we're adding water in order to bring that concentration level back to acceptable normal values. We're not losing anything in the process. We're simply diluting back to healthy, because otherwise we would die from dehydration. And so people who say, you're leaching minerals, they've got this completely backwards. This,
I know.
and I know you love stuff that's inside out and backwards like that. Uh, to point out the silliness of it. I remember one of the very first ones. I don't know if I'm sure you do too, Hey, if you're not eating cold food in the winter, how come you're still eating hot food in the summer?
Yes.
That's a Paul Nissan quote, and it's the same thing. So when I hear something so silly like, "Oh, you're dehydrated," but when you add water to a dehydrated person, we're creating harm by leaching. No, we're creating health by bringing nutrient values that were too dense back into the proper dilution levels.
Okay. Well said. Uh, Next topic. What's your current opinion about juicing?
My opinion on juicing hasn't, I don't believe, ever changed. Um, I'm I enjoy a juice as much as the next person. I am a strong fan of eating whole foods. And so, and I know full well that whole foods have been a cornerstone of healthy eating since long before any of us became aware of raw foods as one of the types of whole foods to eat. Um, the question of whether or not a steamed cauliflower is still a whole food, well, that's another issue. So I can go to any nutrition book, any, doesn't matter, and it's going to list fiber as a nutrient. I can go to the grocery store, go to the supermarket, and see that a bunch of what are called health food cereals have breakfast cereals have added fiber. or with fiber added, as if fiber is a health product. And I find it funny that those same grocery stores, well, they give you the option, but those same grocery stores, you can, if you go at dinner time, and because you're looking for something to have for dinner, and you see in the health part of the store that they're selling you some kind of green juice. You go, wow, I can go get my breakfast cereal with fiber added because it's healthier for me. And I can get my green juice in the afternoon with the fiber removed because it's healthier for me. And I go, oh, I'm back to another Paul Nissanism, aren't I? It's good to add fiber in the morning because it's good for you, but it's better to remove fiber in the evening because it's better for you. And you end up scratching your head going, how can that possibly be? So while I'm not coming out against juice, I'm coming out in favor of whole food. I would say, as far as your culinary presentation, if you want to make juice out of a tomato so that you can serve this lovely clear tomato juice, and then take all the fiber that you separated out and put it into making a tomato cookie or a tomato vegetable sauce or whatever you're going to do with the rest of the tomato, and you serve it somewhere else, well, in the course of that meal, you ate the whole tomato. Whoopee, it's still whole food. And isn't it lovely that we can do culinary arts and play with our food and make things for presentation purposes and for texture and mouthfeel and aroma and all the different things that we can do with food. I love playing with my food, and sometimes makes food more enticing. What I'm anti is presenting the concept that food that's had the fiber removed, fiber is a nutrient. I'm anti presenting the concept that food that has had the fiber removed is more nutritious than whole food. So the idea that celery juice is more nutritious than celery is fallacious, and I'm never going to promote that. Is there a time in an individual person having a specific health problem where they might need to avoid fiber because of their health problem? Yes, but that doesn't make it more nutritious. It just means that at that moment, hey, we all need sunlight, but a person with sunburn doesn't need sunlight
Well, the
for a
question
moment.
from absorbing, let's say a collard leaf or a spinach leaf, do you think the body will absorb more? Not if it has more nutrients, but will absorb more nutrients from a glass of spinach juice versus eating spinach?
Anytime we we have a problem. We have two problems have come up here, Paul. One, we can't digest fiber. And so if we start with tough vegetables, we can't access the nutrients inside each cell unless we chew like crazy or blend or juice or do something to it. You could cut it to a pulp even. People good with a knife could cut it until the juice runs out. But the only nutrients that we can access are the nutrients inside the cells in the juices. That's where the nutrients are. Although fiber itself is also listed as a nutrient, but it's not a nutrient that you absorb. So you're asking an interesting question. Will we absorb, right? Because we give up on an essential nutrient, fiber, in order to absorb more of some other nutrients. Yet we have to ask two questions. One, if we can't enjoy it as is in nature, is it food? Questionable. People say the same thing about cooking. Oh, well, you can't really eat a shoe, but if you cook it, you could eat it. Okay, great. Can't that doesn't mean that it's food for
That's a
people.
great segue to the next topic. But
Okay.
I'll finish your thought and then I'll. It's a great segue.
And then I think what I think is the kicker or the critical thing, and people are going to have the hardest time with this. In all blood work, we know that you don't want too much or too little. You want to come in the normal value, whether it's hemoglobin or whatever you're looking at, iron levels, doesn't matter what. There's low, there's high, and there's normal value. And we want to come in the normal value. Granted, raw fooders might want to skew those numbers a little bit one way or another compared to everybody else, but we still, for a raw fooder, we still want normal value. We don't want too much or too little. We know that you can die from too much vitamin A, D, E, and K. We know that you can die from too much of a wide variety of minerals. We know that you can die from too much of several other nutrients on top of those. And yet, with all of that, we still fall for the idea that more equals better in the world of nutrition, and it does not. I subject to you the concept that what we want in the world of nutrition as ideal nutrition is not too much, not too little, but just the right amount of nutrients as we find them in the readily consumable fruits and vegetables. And so, although you might find more in juiced collard greens than you would in some other thing, more does not equate to better in the world of nutrition any more than you wear a size 10 shoe, but if I got you a size 20 shoe, that would be better. It would be more shoe, but it would be a pain in the butt to walk around in it because it would be a size 20. I once held a pair of 23s in my hand just to see what it would be like, and I wouldn't want to have to walk. Maybe I could go to sleep inside of it, but I wouldn't want to walk in it. And in the world of nutrition, we fall for this again and again and again and again, over and over. People have a very difficult time understanding that we're not looking for more nutrients. We're looking for the right amount and the right ratio of nutrients, and that more works against us, not for us. And so I'm not looking for more, and I'm not for a second going to think that it's more nutritious to juice, which was the question. It's not more nutritious to juice. No.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not against a juice. I come to your house, you make me a juice. I go, this is wonderful. Great. Thank you very much. It's nice. It's a pleasure to have. It's not something I need to shun like it's poisonous, but it's not more nutritious than the food from which it was refined.
Yes. So on that note, before I go to that other topic, is so your concept of 80-10-10 is more about more calories, not necessarily more nutrients. Is that correct or no?
Well, in my understanding of nutrition, I think that we can take nutrition very simply and look at the food we eat. If you're eating fruits and vegetables and you're happy, you're probably well nourished. If we want to get analytical, we can look at the caloronutrient ratio and say, hey, if you're close to 80-10-10, it's probably sustainable if you're getting enough calories. But if you're a little old lady who doesn't do a lot, you might get by just fine on 1,500 calories a day. And if you're a professional basketball player in your prime and you need 7,500 calories a day, the 80-10-10 ratio still works. It's just the number of it's like whether you drive your car 1,000 miles a day or whether you drive your car 10 miles a day, you put in the exact same fuel.
Sure, but it's about, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying, it's about calories more than it's about nutrients.
Absolutely. It
Okay.
has to be. It has to be. The nutrients are already there in the right proportions, and we don't need to jimmy our diet in such a way as to get this or that nutrient. There's no squirrel, no deer, no fish, no bird plays around with micronutrient ratios in order to get the right balance of omega-3 fatty acids so that it relates properly to magnesium and they don't get, I mean, that's making nutrition difficult. If you want to make nutrition easy, eat fruits and vegetables.
Okay. So the next topic is the natural hygiene. Does your philosophy and go 100% along with the classic view of the natural hygiene diet, or does it differ in any way?
Paul, that's a more interesting question than you know.
We'll do a whole nother topic on that then.
Well, no, it's a short answer. In fact, what would be considered the natural hygiene diet has changed many times over the last 100 years.
But we know what the
And
classic view is of what animals do naturally in nature. Like
well,
what you said
I mean, I
earlier.
know what the current view is, and I know what the current view was 40 years ago, and I know what the current view was 40 years before that, and they're all quite different from each other. So if you were to ask someone today the current classical natural hygiene
I'm talking
view,
about Herbert Shelton,
yeah,
William Messer.
I get you. So I just want to be really clear what I'm
Okay,
answering.
okay.
Because even in the Sheltonian times, they hadn't yet really cottoned on to raw food as the only food to eat. They hadn't cottoned on to vegan as the only food to eat. They certainly felt that like goat's milk was a viable protein source, um, oddly enough, and and cheese made from goat's milk. So yes, I'd say it differs a bit. I'm promoting a vegan approach to diet, but even a vegan approach opens up world. The old saying is that nature abhors a vacuum, but nature also abhors being put in a box, being classified. And so we have a class of foods that are known as protists. The entire world of protista, which is many of the seaweeds and the algae and the phytoplanktons and a whole world of protista out there that scientists don't even know yet where to classify this as to whether it is animal or plant. But currently, none of the science views say that it's a plant. Some say it's an animal. Most say, no, it's its own thing. It's protista. It's neither animal nor plant. It's protista. And vegan, whoever makes the official saying on vegan, hasn't taken a stance on protista. It's neither animal nor plant. And they just said no animals, but they didn't say and protista. And then we come into the whole world of mushrooms and fungi, which is probably most of the life on planet Earth. And and once again, it is neither animal nor plant. So in the first case, you have what might be an animal that photosynthesizes, which would be quite odd. In the second case, we have something that definitely isn't an animal, but it also doesn't photosynthesize in ways that we understand. It's certainly not green. And and people say, well, is fungus vegan? Do you eat fungus? Well, I enjoy a mushroom here and there. I don't think they're the world's most best, thing ever, but I'm not going to shun a mushroom. Uh, and so people can say, oh, well, you're not really vegan. So, in some senses, my diet is really simple. I eat fruits and vegetables, including nuts and seeds if I want them. My diet is obviously predominated by fruit and vegetable. almost equal in terms of quantities, but 90% of calories and more are coming from fruit. Uh, and then you can get into definitions. For instance, in botany, a pineapple isn't technically a fruit, okay, and an almond is. Well, in the kitchen, okra is a vegetable, but in botany, okra is a fruit. So always, 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 I will talk about the way we eat it, not the way some science has defined it, because rice could be considered fruit according to botany, but I'm not really worried about that. In the kitchen, rice isn't fruit.
Sure.
So I'm always going with the kitchen definition, what's called the culinary definition or the culinary use. When I talk about fruits and vegetables, I'm always talking about culinary.
Wow, something you just said that was profound, and people, it was just great. The 80-10-10 diet. By volume, you eat equal amount of fruits and vegetables, but the majority of your calories are coming from the fruit, and that's a big important distinction because people automatically think I'm going to eat this little bit of vegetables and you eat only fruit or fruitarianism, which is not what you're promoting. You're promoting getting the majority of your calories from fruit, but that's not fruitarianism because you're eating half of your diet is vegetables. But that's a very important point. So, what do you think about fruitarianism?
Well, it's a great question. And now the distinction between botany and culinary
Great,
does come into
perfect.
play. Now it comes into play because in a culinary world where the tomato is a vegetable, does not agree with the fruitarian botanical world where the tomato is a fruit. So I have seen people do perfectly well on a fruitarian diet if they're talking about botanical fruit. So they would eat okra with no problem. They would munch on okra, they would munch on a zucchini, and they would consider that part of their fruitarian diet. And they will do just fine. But the people who try to have a culinary fruitarianism and they go, no, I'm only eating oranges, I'm only eating bananas, I'm only eating whatever it is, watermelon. I've never ever seen anybody succeed on a diet that was just culinary fruit. In fact, I've always only met them after they failed or just before they failed. And they fail time and again. And they don't fail instantly. You can do it for a week or a month or maybe even a year, but things start to break down. Mental health breaks down, dental health breaks down, emotional
That's
health breaks down.
powerful, and I think it's important because a lot of YouTubers today, I would say what you're saying, the culinary and versus non-culinary is there's non-sweet fruits and then or low sweet
Sure,
fruits and high sweet fruits. And what you're saying is if you're including both of those in your fruitarian diet, you get the great recipe
you're
for
good to go.
success. But if you're
Sure.
trying to do only sweet fruits, then you're saying that's not a good recipe for success.
No,
Maybe I don't know if you agree with me or not, but many of the new fruitarians out there today are focusing exclusively on the high sugar fruits and they're
yeah,
setting
and
themselves up
it'll
for
work
disaster.
short term. That will work short term because anything will work short term. You could
Yeah,
eat nothing for
exactly. Any
60
yeah.
days and you'll be fine for 60 days if you had just water. Um, and as long as we're skirting around all of that topic without ever putting our finger on the nail, uh, could I at least mention an idea? There is a huge promotion of green, that green is so important, that green has a nutrient in it that we can only get from green, and we've got to have it. You know which one?
Chlorophyll?
Chlorophyll. Chlorophyll makes things green. It's a pigment. If you look at the if you look at the chemistry of what makes chlorophyll, there's no protein in chlorophyll, next to none. But there are health institutes that promote chlorophyll because it's a high protein food. It's a high protein substance. Most of those are West Coast, not East Coast institutes, but there are places that teach this. There's people who talk about the health value of food because of its high chlorophyll content. And I'm going to put out an idea for people to chew on, that chlorophyll poses no nutrient value to us. We as human beings do not need chlorophyll as part of a healthy diet. We get chlorophyll along with things that we eat in our healthy diet. Chlorophyll's in there in lettuce, and it's in there in celery, and it's in there in things that are green. But we're not eating it because of the chlorophyll. We don't need the chlorophyll. We could live a life that was chlorophyll free, and we would be just as healthy and just as happy as we are with chlorophyll. Chlorophyll isn't, you open any nutrition book, chlorophyll is not mentioned. It's not a nutrient. And it's just another little, when you said at the opening, we'll talk about our mistakes and we learn more from making mistakes than almost any other way. Those are critical teaching moments. And the idea that chlorophyll is so important to humans, no, not really true at all.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for that. That's everyone, this is valuable information. So I pray that it's helping you all, and thank you. So what
Well,
about from
Paul,
a
you put out thousands of different views from thousands of different people, and I appreciate that. And I know I've sat in your seat on the interview side of things, and I appreciate how challenging sometimes it's got to be to hear people say what they know to be true
no, even
when you
from
know something different. And I'm not saying that this is one of those cases. I think this is valid food for thought, because a lot of people have been taught over and over about the importance of chlorophyll, and I'm going to go out there and say, nah,
sure.
not
No,
important.
even from when I wrote my book, The Real Life, I have all these interviews with people that don't agree 100% with each other. My
Right.
goal is to get to people to be thinking and help their own research to apply what these things to their life. So,
Absolutely.
so I'm not trying to confuse people. I just don't want to
I don't
have.
know. I'm saying I agree
I'm
with you.
not going around finding everyone that agrees with what I agree with 100% because nobody's learning that way, you know.
Exactly.
So, but and I do, believe it or not, find myself thinking and living and eating pretty close to what you're saying. So it's worked for me, and it's obviously working for you. So
It's working really well.
yes.
I, I mean,
So
everything works. I'm just so excited
now
that
here's the other thing. So do you think, or how can a person get B12 and essential fatty acids from a raw vegan diet?
okay. So B12 is produced by bacteria. There's roughly 100 different bacteria out in the world that produce B12 as part of their metabolic waste. So B12 comes from bacteria poop. Uh, that those bacteria, many of them, thrive on your nasal mucosa. They live inside your nose. They live inside your sinuses. They live in your throat. They live in your intestinal passage. Every time you and swallow, you take in B12 along with everything else that you just took in the transport medium of the mucosa. But B12 is only manufactured by bacteria. So there's no animal, there's no plant. I know there's people promoting this and that plant that has B12 in it, but B12 comes from bacteria. At that point, the external factor that we call B12 mixes with an internal factor. It's known as an intrinsic factor that's manufactured by parietal cells in the wall of the stomach. And those cells produce this intrinsic factor that combines with the extrinsic factor from bacteria to end up with the end product that we call B12 finished product, which we can then absorb and utilize. B12 is super important. It's so important that we store decades worth in our liver most of the time. So I don't have a problem with getting B12. The issue is more one of going low in B12 when we switch diets. And in fact, the studies done on B12, first of all the discoveries of B12 were done on meat-eating people. All of the initial B12 deficiencies that were discovered for the first several thousand cases were all on meat-eating people. All of the studies comparing various diets and B12 deficiency propensity concluded that no diet made you more or less prone to B12 deficiency. And yet we see people going deficient when they go raw vegan. We see it happen. And it happens in the early days, in the first 5 to 10 years generally, sometimes 15 years, but it happens in the early stages. Why does it happen? It happens for a reason that's full well understood. It's called the law of dual effect. And what happens with everything in the body is we always get two reactions. We get an acute reaction and then a chronic reaction. And the acute reaction is strong but short-lived. The chronic reaction is longer lasting but not as intense. And so if you get put to sleep, somebody holds a gas over your face and puts you to sleep. At first you fight it, but then you go to sleep for 30 minutes. When you get a high value of a nutrient exposure, and then you stop that high value nutrient exposure, you eventually go very low for a period of time before you come back up to normal. So in the world at large, normal B12 values are determined by taking blood work, doing B12 analysis on general people eating a general diet. And those people are eating fortified breakfast cereals, fortified with B12. They're eating breads that are enriched, and they're enriched with B12. Breakfast, lunch, and usually at dinner, they're eating foods that have been enriched with B12. So they're on a continuous feed, a drip feed, if you will, 3 times a day and more of B12 supplementation, meaning that what we consider the normal value for B12 is actually skewed tremendously high based on the amount of supplementation that people are taking in their breakfast, lunch, and dinner food. When we go to raw food where there's no B12 supplementation, for a while, B12 levels will drop off, and can get dangerously low, admittedly, can get dangerously low. In every instance where I've seen this happen, if we supplement once, maybe for a month or something, daily for a month, maybe daily for 3 months, depends on the situation. But if we supplement once and then stop supplementing, the person never goes B12 deficient a second time. It's not that they're prone to it. They just had to learn to utilize more effectively the B12 coming from their own bacteria, as opposed to the B12 they were getting from enriched and foods that have been supplemented with B12. We don't need a lot of it, which means that if we say normal values are 200 to 900, or even 100 to 900, and a person walks into your office with a level of 75, but they have no B12 deficiency symptoms, I'm more thinking that there's no reason to supplement, even though medically they would be considered dangerously low. because if you don't have a deficiency symptom of any kind, what would be the point? It'd be like check the air on your tires and it's 32 and it's supposed to be 32 and you go, well, I'm going to supplement some air in there because it could go low. Well, you have no symptoms. If you have no symptoms, why supplement? If that's the case, you have to supplement everything always, and that makes no sense. In terms of omegas, you get all the omegas you need from your vegetables and your fruit. It's there in enough quantity. You don't need more. But if you eat the occasional fatty fruit, if you eat the occasional seeds or even some nuts, you get more than enough of the omegas. This is a fine tuning of nutritional concerns designed to sell product where they tell us that, oh, you don't have enough omega-3 compared to the omega-6, so let's add in some more omega-3. In fact, what you should be doing is reducing the omega-6, and that would bring the levels back to normal. But most people aren't ready to reduce their fat intake, and until they're ready to talk about increasing fruit intake in order to lower fat intake, you can't possibly have a winning combination. Trying to micromanage omega levels might be fine in a dating situation where you can walk up to a woman in a bar and say, hey, where do you get your omegas? But any other way, I don't think we should be worried about this in terms of food.
Okay, thank you. Next topic is fasting. What's your current
Yeah, I just wrote a
understanding?
big piece on fasting.
Yeah, what's your
Um,
understanding and belief and suggestions for fasting for people?
Anytime you don't feel like yourself is a great time to fast, but we have to understand that fasting doesn't mean not eating. Fasting means resting. So I see a lot of people say, hey, I was on a 20-day juice fast. I had so much energy. I got so much done. It took so little time. All my meals, all that prep, I was so energetic. I really felt good. And I just kept going. And I'm going, yeah, you can call it a juice fast if you want. Uh, But my understanding and my use of fasting is that fasting equates with the concept of resting, physical, emotional, sensory, even physiologic resting. Physiologic resting means we don't eat anything. We let the digestive system shut down and the digestive processes shut down. Digestion is different than absorption. We're still absorbing water, but digestion itself, those processes shut down. And if you take a rest, I'm all in favor of a rest. I think we should rest whenever we have an increased need for rest or even a need for rest. And we should rest at an increased level when we have an increased need for rest. And when you're sick, resting is the best way to get well, which is the approach that hospitals use. They don't fast you in hospitals. They feed you, and in spite of the food they give you, you still somehow magically usually get well. But the reason you got well is because you took a big rest. You took a sensory rest. You took an emotional rest. You let other people do the worrying for you for a while. You take a physical rest. You got 3 out of 4. You did okay. I'm a huge fan of fasting. I respect that fasting can be dangerous, that people are sicker today than ever before, and that supervision, proper supervision by trained professionals, is critical in fasts occasionally. But you don't know when that's going to be. It's like wearing a helmet when you ride a motorcycle or putting a seatbelt on when you drive a car. By the time you get in an accident, it's too late to put on the helmet.
I wear a helmet when I drive my car.
Hey, you know what? There's a million head injuries a year inside cars. People refuse to wear helmets. But if you want to stop a million head injuries a year in the US alone, all we have to do is add in helmets into the equation. It's
All right.
pretty it's something I've talked about for a long, long time. I'm in favor of fasting, but I'm in favor of supervised fasting. I had to take a woman to a hospital 3 days into a supervised fast. I told another fasting professional about it. He said he took somebody to the hospital on the second day of a supervised fast. I wouldn't suggest that fasting is just safe up until 5 days or 7 days, although most of the time it is. The odds are in your favor. But It doesn't mean that it's completely safe. By the time you get in trouble, it's too late to be looking for help or to be asking somebody to step in and save me. I did something really that I shouldn't have done. I still offer supervised fasts every year. I fast people differently than I used to. When I ran my fasting retreat, it ran like a hotel. You came when you wanted and left when you were ready. Uh, Now I run retreats so that we have a group feeling and we have mutual support and everybody's there for everybody else. And I find this works far better. It works far better for the educational process as well, because I can spend more time with everyone telling them what they're going through and explaining it rather than over and over and over and over going through the same stuff. So I'm a huge fan of fasting, but I'm even more of a fan of healthful living, living in such a way that as if we intend fasting not to be required. So I don't want to see how much can I abuse myself because a year from now I'm going to take a fast and I'm going to undo the damage. I'd much rather live as conservatively as I can, conserve my health, build my health, accumulate my health. And if I have to fast, well, I have to fast, but I'm not building my life around the fast. But phenomenal number of health issues will only correct themselves when we fast. It's the only way I've seen it done. There's sure lots of people get better from lots of things on lots of programs and certainly on raw foods. But I've seen far too many issues where the only thing that's going to bring this around is going to be a fast.
Well, I've seen your clips on Instagram from your fasting, your current fasting retreats. They're excellent. I loved
Thank you.
it, and I'm going to put Dr. Graham's contact information and his social media below this video for you to click on, and you can get all the information from him and his retreats and everything he does and his book and his books. And he's just wonderful. So all that's going to be below the video in the description. So we have one more topic to discuss and then one more question. So the topic is I've seen several raw fooders over the years, vegans, uh, with high cholesterol, high LDL, and they're not necessarily on a high fat diet, all of
Hmm.
them. How is that possible? Is that hereditary or can it be, is it all diet related?
There definitely is, or poor sentence structure, but there definitely is a condition that's a hereditary high cholesterol. Typically, for those people, that high cholesterol level isn't particularly dangerous like it would be for the rest of us, where it would be high. That would be their normal. Um, and if they're not doing things to cause excessively higher cholesterol, then they will be just fine with that. I can't say that's the case for all the people you're talking about. We haven't met them, so we don't know. But this certainly is not rare. Right? It's not a rare condition, and cholesterol values for most people want to run somewhere as close to 100, or if you want to stretch it and be relaxed, 100 plus half your age. But it is possible to have a higher level cholesterol in a certain percentage. I don't know the percentage of the population, so I can't give a number there. Um, and that can happen. But we also see cholesterol levels vary fairly, not as quick as triglyceride levels, but cholesterol levels do vary quite a bit and can go up and down fairly quickly. I put my mom on a program and her cholesterol dropped 100 points in 90 days. So if you have two blood tests 90 days apart, you could easily see a cholesterol value change by what was in her case almost 100%, right? Like it went in half.
Hers was pretty much diet related though, right?
Hers was diet related. Yeah, we
So,
just
but if
changed
it's
diet.
hereditary, it's not going to jump back and forth as
No, we can take somebody with hereditary high fat or relatively high cholesterol levels and put them on a water fast. Uh, Put them on a low fat raw vegan diet or a no fat, even if they're, you want to call it that. It's not. There's still fat in watermelon. Um, and they will remain high. It's like skin color at that point. I mean,
Sure.
different people have different skin colors.
Sure. Well, perfect. Going back to the last thing on fasting, dry fasting, is that a rest or you don't, it's too dangerous? What's your opinion?
A fantastic number of people have died from dry fasting, whether the dry fast was intentional or unintentional, optional. Uh, I don't recommend dry fasting, but again, we have to look at what is fasting. So when we talk about dry fasting, we're talking about, hey, I'm not gonna drink any water and I'm not gonna eat any food, but I'm also not gonna take a rest. And somehow magically that's gonna be good for me. And maybe not eating for a few meals did you some benefit. But if you were eating food that was really good for you, you probably didn't need to stop doing that. Uh, the logic of dry fasting never ceases to amaze me when the rest of the entire world is telling you dehydration is a problem, drink more water, when we know that people die from dehydration in a variety of circumstances. And now we've got people telling us dehydration is a health practice. And I find this just remarkable. Not only do people tell us dehydration is a health practice, but that we can rapidify the dehydration by drinking salt water. So not only is dry fasting a dangerous issue, but salt water fasting, an even more dangerous version of fasting, because you go dehydrated even quicker on salt water than you do on no water. And I have the solution to all of that. The if those things actually work, then the best fast in the world would be a fast where you don't drink water, but you do eat salt. And the salt fast would be the most, well, it would be the quickest, that's for sure, because you die very quickly on a salt diet. I say this all tongue in cheek, please. I'm so saddened by the idea of dry fasting, because I don't think in the last 15 or 20 years since this has come into vogue that a year has gone by without a death from dry fasting. And it's a death that easily could have been avoided, and it's a sad thing. So I don't promote dry fasting
Right.
ever.
What type of
But
water? What type of water do you recommend? Do you give when you do your fast and retreat? Is it distilled?
no, it's not distilled.
Is
It's
it
not
article?
distilled. We use water that is triple filtered, artesian water. So it's water coming up out of the ground, and then it goes through a triple filter process, and then we use it. And I've never ever had a complaint about the water.
Is that just because that's what's available, or is it
Yes,
because that you okay? But what do you think is best if somebody had an option to fast on? If they were doing a fast, let's say even a supervised fast, do you think it's better to fast with distilled, or do you think it's going
yes.
back to your
I
question?
would use distilled if I had access to a distiller of that size. When I ran my fasting retreat center, I had an oversized distiller and a backup distiller. Um, but I don't think, again, as I said, I don't think it's a critical thing, because we're only talking about a 20 days out of a lifetime, and that amount of water just isn't that critical.
So last question of the day or night or whatever we are, wherever we are in this world, is what is your absolute favorite fruit?
Well, Bill Lassard, and he passed away.
Yeah, I was just at his place recently, his old place, because Miami Fruit's there now.
And and I asked Bill that question 40 years ago, and he told me something that I would call a Zen answer.
I know what you're gonna say.
Of course, he said, the fruit I'm eating now.
Yep, yep. Well, the
Okay,
fruit
because
that's in
that's the
season.
only moment in time that we have in our entire life is now. But I like different fruits. If I was going to take my top, I could put 50 fruits into my top 10 list. I could put 10 into my top one list. If I was going to, I'd have to go um, to decide whether we're saying for flavor or for satiation value. If I was going to go for the satiation value, I would choose Pantene Mame as my favorite fruit. But if I was going to go strictly for flavor, I'd go for Champadek. Something about Champadek satisfies me like nothing I've ever. I don't know why. It's Champadek does the job.
Wonderful.
But I'll
Well,
tell you that Muson King is right up there.
yes, absolutely. Well, Dr. Doug Graham, thank you so much. And everybody, the contact information, his website, his social media links, they're all right below this video.
Alt
Contact him,
left.
get on them, and just wonderful information. And I definitely look forward to having you on the show again. And everybody,
Thanks,
put your
Paul.
comments and questions below the video and ask them. So when we have him on again, we'll have questions for him, maybe even doing a live Q&A with him in the future.
Yeah, somebody needs to interview you to get all that knowledge out of your head too and bring it out to the people, because I know you got a wealth of experience and a good head on your shoulders. I'm glad you're happy and healthy and doing so well. Bless you and your family. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Yes, we have a lot more that we didn't get to talk about that we will maybe in part two, but thank you so much.
Sure, my treat.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.